Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host, Dan Maisey, dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. Join us today as we welcome Simon Dent, a cross-sector leader in the sports and creative industries. Simon's career spans various roles, from a founder and investor to a non-exec director, and the rather impressive challenges he undertakes as an endurance athlete. His current ventures, including Hero, as an investor in Urban Legends Donuts and Palmari Gin, reflect his commitment to mentorship, innovation and excellence. Simon has left a significant mark in the world of sports marketing and branding through his work with Dark Horses, the agency that he founded, where he collaborated with high-profile clients like Nissan and TikTok, demonstrating his prowess in navigating the complexities of the sports and creative sectors. Beyond his professional endeavours, Simon is dedicated to making a positive impact, evident in the founding of the Urban Journal and directorship at the British Sports Museum and his work for charity. Simon's journey, characterised by leadership, innovation and a deep passion for sports and creativity, offers invaluable insights into the intricacies of recruitment and talent strategy in the dynamic landscapes of sports, media and entertainment. Simon, welcome to Talent Talks. How are you?
Wow, thank you for that amazing introduction. Yeah, I'd give him a job.
There you go. Podcast over. Done. Right, let's get into it. We ask the same question to every guest that we have on. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired? And do you have any lessons learned from those experiences?
Big question. I mean, I've had lots of experiences of recruitment, hiring, and probably my formative one was as a young lawyer. And it took me 3 years and over 250 rejections to get a training contract. So for those listeners who don't know, as a lawyer, you do your degree, you then do your law school, and then you do what they call a 2-year training contract. It took me 3 years to get one. So my first experience and memories was one of brutal rejection. In those days, a letter would come, and it sort of got staged. And I've got these. There's 220 of them in the garage actually, and I've got these letters. And every day, or I was still living at home with my parents, they'd sort of arrive, and it was sort of that. And so you can imagine doing that 200 times. Traumatic. But anyway, off the back of that, things got a bit better. I finally got a job, and yeah, it's been a lot more rosy since then. And I think more recently, having been an employer, sitting on the other side of the fence, it's been fascinating.
And in terms of the experiences you had when you were being interviewed for the training contracts, let alone the element of the rejection, actually, out of interest, did you get any feedback with that rejection, or was it just flat out no's every time?
They were letters, and there was never any explanation.
Yeah. Okay, back to the original question. What have you taken from those formative experiences and made sure that you either include or very much exclude from your processes when you're hiring?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for me, I've really moved away in the last probably 8 years. My biggest recruiting experience to date was at Dark Horses, and we went from 0 to 65 people in 2.5 years. And so that was just a recruitment extravaganza. We were recruiting in all sorts of ways. But what was interesting was that we very quickly moved away from recruitment based on CVs. We ended up using very trusted recruitment consultants, recruiters, I guess, who we would spend a lot of time with, and I would invest probably 2 or 3 lunch or breakfasts a week with them to continually shape the profile of the people that we were looking for. And that was evolving. So what we looked for on day one very quickly changed. And obviously, as I said, there was one period of time where in 6 months we had 30 people come in, which was incredible. And also very, we did a good job because we were very much culture first. So the preservation of the culture was so important. But yeah, I think one of the big things for me has been the moving away from the reliance on the CV, and I suppose the emphasis on cultural fit, endorsement, stroke recommendation. And actually what was something really important was getting as many people in the team who would be working with that person to meet them.
Okay. Interesting. But what's really interesting there is the amount of time that you took from essentially a strategy perspective, a talent strategy perspective of these are the people that we need. We're not going to necessarily be the ones looking for them. So the people that are looking for them need to really understand the ins and outs of exactly of what we want. When you're hiring on, and this is a question that I've asked a couple of times, but when you're hiring on culture and values, how do you stop hiring the same type of person? How do you encourage diversity across the spectrum, including diversity of thought, diversity in terms of D&I? How do you make sure that you're not just employing the same people because you are looking ultimately for the same type of cultural fit, as it were?
Yeah, it's a good point. But we were very, as I said earlier, we were very keen to have team members, including junior team members, be part of the recruitment process. So as we got bigger, there was a real emphasis on recruiting people that didn't see the world like the leadership group saw the world, and that was really important. And there's a few roles I'm recruiting for at the moment where we're doing exactly that. It's so important that you don't just have everyone, especially in the creative industries or even working at brand, everyone with the same point of view, and that's not just from day to day functionality in the office, but that's really important when it comes to strategic and creative thinking. Quite interesting though, just on that point around the growth of dark horses and how we recruited. It was, we were very much a startup at the outset. It was myself and we recruited. It took me 6 months to get one person in, and then off the back of that, we had some success and a lot of luck with some business wins, and therefore we were very much recruiting people who had what we believe to have a sort of entrepreneurial lens on things, because we were a startup. And that point around meeting recruiters regularly to change and the briefs was because as we grew up as a business and certainly got to sort of years 3 and 4, we actually needed experienced people from the field we were working in, rather than what you'd call, thoroughbred hustlers, entrepreneurs, because actually the business was established by the entrepreneurship. We'd brought the work in. We now had experienced people to handle it. So it was a very sort of, what I'm trying to say is some people that were recruited in year 4 probably wouldn't have been recruited in year 1 and vice versa.
Yeah. And was there any occasions when that shift happened where you may have brought somebody in that after a couple of months you thought, actually, this isn't the right person, this isn't the right cultural fit? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, we had that on a couple of occasions. I think it's, and by the way, from both parties, it wasn't just cultural fit. It was employees realizing we weren't right for them, and that's important to stress that. I think that we got it right most of the time. I think again, it was, it became, as a fast moving, fast growing business, getting the culture fit. It was sometimes quite challenging, but as I said, we started to empower people, account management, and the like, to be quite heavily involved in the recruitment. So their sort of teams within the office on various accounts, they would be very hands-on in the recruitment. But yeah, of course, you do get things wrong sometimes, and that is something that it's unfortunate, but it's important to have that ongoing dialogue with the employee or with the recruiter. And again, sorry, something to touch on. One of our biggest weapons, I suppose, during that time was actually asking our employees to recommend people they'd worked with before. And if I think back to that period, probably 2018-19, I'd say we probably brought in a handful of people who were recommended by people who understood the agency, understood what we stood for, and knew what the expectation was when it came to level of output.
It's the responsibility that you gave to the account teams, and both from a recommendation perspective, because ultimately if those recommendations don't come off, then it doesn't look good on the person that's recommended it just as much. But also it gives a good level of experience to those junior staff coming in when they're recruiting and when they're interviewing further down the line. One of the things that one of the themes that's come out so far in the podcast is actually there is no real learning and development from an interviewing and from a recruitment perspective. You kind of just learn on the job, and the earlier that you can do that, the better it is, because you then start taking that on a lot more when you do start making potentially slightly more important hires. On that, obviously, apart from outside of the kind of more strategic elements and working with the recruiters, how hands-on were you in the actual interviewing process side of things?
I would always be involved in recruitment. However, with Dark Horses as a creative agency, we got to the stage and size where my creative director Steve Howe would could quite comfortably recruit creative teams without my involvement. We just got to that size, and yeah, where I did not, Steve and I had worked together 3 years. He knew what we were looking for. He knew what we were about, and most importantly, he knew what the creative department needed, which I probably didn't. So I didn't need to be involved in that. And if I was, that would just be micromanaging, and there's no need for that. So I think, yeah, certainly from an account team, certainly from a new business and business development team. But yeah, as any business grows, I think it's probably fair to say that the founder or the CEO needs to sort of move out of the way and let the departmental heads take control of things.
Yeah. Moving on a little bit from the Dark Horses days into what you're doing now and working with organizations that are recruiting. What are the differences that you've seen from when you were recruiting back then to now, whether that's tech, whether that's even differences in the people that are coming up and the opportunities that are there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm fortunate to be across a number of businesses, from a retail to fast moving consumer goods to a production company. So I'm operating a number of pillars in a non-executive director roles, and I see very different strategies, which is interesting. All very different to how I did it, but I do think that 4 or 5 years ago in the UK was very different to now. I think something I've been quite surprised at is the work from home. I know it's probably exhausting listening to a middle-aged man in his 40s talking about he's against work from home. I'm not against work from home. I actually work from home, but it's sort of that does seem to be a question that's asked quite a lot. How much time do we need to be in the office? Which, yeah, I've got over that now. So that's a really important point, because again, we all know that's going to be very hard culturally to integrate people, to have that osmosis learning, to really understand what a business is about, if it's a business that was launched pre the pandemic. Yeah, one production company I'm working with at the moment are using AI, and I know we've spoken about this historically. I find that quite interesting. They basically are using some sort of sweeping software to basically, as their first round of interviews, it is sweeping applications to see if that candidate is suitable. So that is something I've never experienced. Great, if it works, we shall see. But yeah, I think the technology has, I think mainly, I guess, through AI. I mean, LinkedIn's an interesting one. Probably again, at the peak of recruiting, my recruiting as a recruiter, as an employer in 2018-19, LinkedIn wasn't particularly useful because I just didn't have the time to filter responses. And obviously I had some very helpful people in my team around me, but it would, if you were, which we were, a successful business that people wanted to work out, if you put the word out on LinkedIn that you were looking for employees, you'd get 100, 200, maybe more applications, and you've got to do the job, and that job can take a week to sift through those properly. So, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts, and if you've had any other guests on with strong views on LinkedIn, but I am more and more. I'm not really leaning towards it as actually a recruitment platform.
It's the user experience isn't fantastic. I think in my old agency role when we were hiring, exactly the same thing. You put a post out about needing a content creator, and you got 500-600 responses, and
Yeah.
the challenge is then actually from a candidate perspective, you want to be able to respond to everybody, but that's so challenging when you've got so many people and you've got a day job. There is tech out there, and you're right, we discussed this, but there is tech out there that will help with that and helps with that large scale kind of application process. But I think LinkedIn's very much become I would say kind of over the pandemic and beyond, I'd say over the last kind of 2 years has become much more prevalent as a use of a social media. It's been huge for a long time, of course. I'm not saying it hasn't, but in terms of actually the emphasis that is now placed on it has completely changed. And I think it is still quite challenging to just use it for hiring, because the user journey is not particularly great. But there are, again, other tech elements that can help with that. One of the biggest challenges I find is you're going out to your network. It's very challenging to then go wider than your network. So actually what you're doing is not pushing out a job that could be suitable or suited to someone much better, but that just happens to be a few connections away from you, and unless you're very, very lucky, and obviously luck plays a part. And so it's quite an interesting kind of piece to look at. How do we push those jobs wider to get the right people, certainly in the sports industry? And it's my genuine belief that I don't think we have enough diversity of thought within the industry from a wider perspective. And so we need to be pushing those job descriptions much wider. When you were recruiting for Dark Horses, and certainly now, what's the emphasis on sports experience and that kind of sports bubble? Obviously relevant to the sports element, to what you're doing.
Yeah, so obviously at Dark Horses, the first thing that I did, and the reason Dark Horses launched, was because I'd approached the best-in-class advertising agency called Lucky Generals, and off the back of merging my sports contact with their creative industry reputation and prowess, it gave us a really good blend that I don't think the agency industry had seen before. And basically, I brought in some sports marketing and sports business expertise. I suppose my recruits had a bit more of that about them, whereas the likes of Steve Howe, my creative director, when he came in, very well-known creative, he started bringing well-known people and helping attract, more importantly, well-known people from the advertising world. So we had a really nice blend. Obviously, I haven't been in the leadership role there for fast approaching 4 years now, so the agency has changed. But yeah, it certainly was launched with that sort of my, I guess, entrepreneurial sports marketing, sports business background, married with that of creative. Now, again, what I'm doing now, that experience was brilliant for me, because again, with the advice I'm giving businesses such as Folding Pocket and a couple of others at the moment on recruitment and briefs, is trying to have as many people in the leadership group from different backgrounds that bring in sports marketing experience, production experience, creative experience, entrepreneurial experience. And when you have that, I believe it really helps improve the output of the business.
It gives a lot more opportunity for a lot more skill sets, essentially. And again, it comes back to this diversity of thought, but also challenging. You don't want yes people in your business. You want people to really challenge. And did you, when you were, again, as part of your leadership team, how much of an importance was that, where you were focused on not just getting people that are going to say yes to you?
Well, also, it goes back to that point around, we evolved our strategy around recruiting people who with entrepreneur mindsets and a diverse background of employment to, as you grow up and have bigger pieces of business, bigger accounts, you need people that maybe are agency stalwarts who've managed and wrestled big clients into line, and they haven't, no criticism, they haven't had the experience or diversity of experience. So you do need a blend and a mix of everyone. One of the challenges I've seen, and we had it a bit, was that we grew as a business. We had to grow very quickly because of the amount of new business wins. And it's sort of preserving that entrepreneur spirit and thinking, and especially through the pandemic, as things changed in the industry, things changed for everyone, right? And remaining and keeping that entrepreneurial spirit is quite hard when belts have to be tightened. You have to let people go. It becomes harder to devote any resource to doing things differently because there is risk in that.
Yeah. Actually, I remember the first time that you and I were supposed to meet was the day that we went into lockdown.
Is that right?
Yeah. That's a story for another time. But look, we are coming towards.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was. I remember, because I remember being at Quinn's, and it was the week that everyone was starting to work from home, and it was basically like, we're supposed to meet the day after, or whatever it was. And I just remember kind of having a conversation with you, being like, probably shouldn't do a meeting if everybody else is working from home from this COVID thing. Anyway, let's not get into that. But We're coming, Simon. We're coming to the end of what's always a fascinating conversation with you. But look, before we do 3 quick fire questions, which we always end with, I want to mention again the incredible work that you do for charity. A lot of the time, putting your body through, I mean, quite frankly, ridiculous challenges. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that and what's coming up in the very near future?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm a big fundraiser for Dalalio Rugby Works and Greenhouse Sports. I find myself running silly races from, I've got 100k this weekend to a 400 kilometre race coming up in September from Conway Castle to Cardiff Castle. But yeah, Rugby Works and Greenhouse Sports, please check them out. Both are sports focused and youth focused charities doing amazing things around the UK. So please check them out. But yeah, this September is the biggest challenge I've ever taken on, and we hope to raise around £20,000 for charity. So hopefully you can link up the Just Giving in the show notes.
Yeah, not a problem, and we'll push out the links and everything else when we put it out on LinkedIn and all of that stuff. But like I said, it's been fascinating. It's flown by. I think we could probably sit here for another few hours just having a natter, but conscious of your time, especially as you're flying off tomorrow to run another 100 kilometers, which is ridiculous. But anyway, we're at the point now we ask, like I said, these 3 quick fire questions. So we ask the same questions to every guest, short, sharp answers. First one, what is the most frustrating thing about recruitment?
CVs.
That is, again, we could sit here for hours and go through that, but that's not. You don't have to name them, but you're more than welcome to as well. Yeah. Who's been your best hire and why?
Best hire, simple question. Employee number 1 at Dark Horses, a chap called Dan Cunningham, was basically an incredible recruit because he was like a sponge. He had an entrepreneurial mindset, and for probably 4 months, it was just the 2 of us. So he wasn't only recruited as an account manager, he was doing everything. And so I think from getting the first 5 in a startup, getting the 5 recruitment decisions right is important. And Dan, yeah, absolutely gave us a head start.
And then the final thing, you've got a lot of experience across recruitment from Dark Horses, but also what you're doing now. What's the one thing you'd change about the recruitment world?
Oh, it's a big question. I mean, it's quite a similar question to question 1, really, isn't it? But I would say recruiting off personal interaction. And this is quite interesting because this is where this is massively colliding with AI and technology, because I go back to the point about CVs. I don't like CVs. I don't trust CVs. I don't think you can summarize someone's life in a CV. And also, truth be told, CVs allow people to judge you. And I think that from the experiences I've had in my life I have managed to navigate 4 or 5 professions. And if any decision was based on CV, I'd never been able to do that. I based all those on meeting people, networking, growing my network, learning on the job, bit of bullshit here and there, but that's life, right? And if everyone's just judging a piece of paper, then unfortunately everyone's going to end up staying in their lane.
It's a subject very close to home, and I think that again we could sit and debate this for hours, but I'm in agreement with you. CVs are a necessary evil at the moment, but for something that's been essentially in practice since the 1700s and we're still using it today, there's got to be something that is.
They're even called something Latin, which just says it all, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. Leonardo da Vinci was the first person to use one.
There we go.
Yeah. Anyway, brilliant. Simon, thanks again very much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. I know there's a huge amount that people can take from this, so it's been fantastic. Thank you, and yeah, thanks for taking part in Talent Talks.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. See you soon.
Cheers, mate.